Good morning. So before Mike had mentioned CAN in his remarks, who in the room had heard about the Coach and Advisor Network at the Law Society? Yeah, that's amazing, fantastic, good stuff. Okay, so as a starting place, I wanted to say just thank you to Katie for inviting us, me, and also for highlighting these resources on the FOLA website. I think it's great. As much as we can spread the word, I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to just start there. And I know that I was here in May, but today I'm going to do a deep dive into just one of our resources, which is the Coach and Advisor Network. And I thought as a starting place, I was looking around, I was doing something else, and I found this quote by Lewis Carroll, and it says, "I can't go back to yesterday because I was a different person then." And I was like, it kept coming back to me, this idea, I was a different person then, and what does that mean? And I think that we all know from our own experience that we really can't go back to yesterday, and the practice of law has changed. And so what we did before may or may not work, and we have to now come to what is needed right now. And I think that Convocation embraced that question when they approved the creation of this program. They really thought about what was needed right now. And I think that I'm excited to be here today to speak with you about this ambitious undertaking. So what we know is that right now we're educating our children for jobs that don't exist. And so we know that things have changed, but one thing hasn't changed. We know that we need competent professionals in the legal sector. And that's something that we share. CAN and FOLA both share this shared goal of a competent profession. And what I want you to know today, my goal basically is for you to know that CAN is part of the answer to that question. It's part of the answer to what's needed right now. And I hope that you'll be inspired to continue to spread the word with your members. So, this is what I hope to achieve today, but I really want to focus most of my attention on the last point, which is that CAN is a high-impact opportunity for the volunteers and the participants. And why do I say that? I say that because it is, for all the reasons that CAN is different from other programs. So CAN is really about competence in the practice. It's part of a continuum of supports and resources that are available to the professions that support competence. We're about short term. We know you don't have time. We're about outcome oriented. We know you want to have traction. We know that what matters is practical, relevant to right now outcomes. And we know that volunteers and the participants themselves don't want to be involved in anything that doesn't yield a reward. We know that you want to have impact, you have very little time, and you want to find the right vehicle to pour your energy into, both as a participant if you want to affect change in your practice or as a volunteer. So while there are general questions that come into CAN about sort of general career development and such, the model actually encourages the coach, advisor, and participant to get very specific. What do you want to do today? And this allows both the participant and the volunteer to see the impact, to see the change that's happening, the delta. And when you have that, it's a powerful combination. And it means that people are motivated, inspired, momentum is maintained. So I love to describe CAN as the virtual hallway. You know, some of us have had the benefit of being in an environment where you can just walk down the hall and you can bounce an idea off a colleague. And that's a value that can't be replaced. And I think that when I see the requests that come in from the participants, quite often they express things like, "This is my safety net." That's a quote. Someone said, "This is my safety net. I don't know who I would have asked. I don't have anyone else that I could have asked." And even volunteers recognize this quality of providing additional supports when you've come as far as you can on your own and you need to reach out to someone else. A volunteer advised in a letter to me, "I believe that the program is valuable, particularly so for the young and inexperienced, but even for some more senior people when venturing into unfamiliar territory." So I think that if, in a nutshell, if you come away with anything, CAN can be your virtual hallway for your members when they come up against something new or they want to bounce an idea off of somebody. So if we go back to that idea of what is needed right now, I think all of our efforts are focused on ensuring that the right kind of help is available at the right time. And so because of that, we have multiple streams to support competence in the professions. So we have both coaching and advising, and they're actually quite distinct, and they have different obligations or different expectations of the volunteers and the participants in terms of preparation and so on. So just starting first with coaching, it's still a relatively short-term engagement. It's expected that it would be completed over 4 months, so it's kind of like a sprint, you know? I want something specific to change, I'm gonna invest the energy, I'm gonna focus on it. And for our volunteers, they know that it's a defined commitment. It's usually 4 hours. We recommend 1.5 intake and then alternating sessions of 30 minutes each, and so you get up to about 4 hours over 3 months. This is typically done over the phone or by video conference. There is a demand for in-person, but I know that it is difficult to make time for getting between point A and point B, and sometimes in-person can be hard, so I'm really happy to report that there has been a good uptake of remote engagements. The other thing that's interesting to me about coaching is that it doesn't assume that the person that you're being matched with is senior to you. You can express that, you can ask for that in our forms, but because of the coaching model is based on a process as opposed to developing a curriculum or sharing a curriculum, what that means is that you can have matches that are peer-to-peer that can still be effective. Or you could have somebody who's senior being matched with somebody junior depending on the kind of issue that they want to talk about. For example, social media. Or you can have a traditional senior to junior kind of match. But no matter what, the point is that this is about enhancing your practice, and it's about a practice outcome. And although there's no minimum threshold of the number of years to participate in as a coach, most of our coaches do have more than 5 years of experience. You can see that here, 90% have more than 5 years. The interesting thing about opening this up to more junior practitioners is that we're creating that pipeline. We're already building that culture of bringing ourselves up together. And I think that that's a very positive thing. I know a lot of other programs really focus heavily on seniors, but I think if we can get our junior lawyers involved and engaged right away, I think that this bodes well for the profession. The other stream that I was just mentioning is advising. And so advising is different. It's not about a longer term, a quarter sprint. It's like I have a question right now. I have a specific issue, I'm facing something in a client matter, it's substantive or procedural, and I don't know what to do. I've done as much as I can do. And I want to be able to access somebody who has at least 5 years of practice experience. Now again, that's a threshold that we've set. That's a minimum standard, but I can tell you that our roster is very robust. 80% of our advisors have more than 10 years experience. And actually we have, I think there's about 10% of our advisors are also certified specialists. So there's some real depth that's available. And this is a program that's available to all participants. There's no fee, it's part of the fees that the participants pay. And this is available at any time. You don't need to, other than submitting a form, there's no minimum or maximum. So, show of hands, how many people have participated in coaching, not in Little League, but not in a sports context, but they are familiar with coaching? Anyone in the room has done coaching, participated in coaching? Great, okay. I have to say, there's a little bit more of an increase in trend, because when I used to ask that question, nobody had had an experience of coaching outside of, a sort of a sport context. So if you're familiar with coaching, that what you, I'm sure, have gleaned is that coaching is really a purposeful conversation, and it's a conversation that supports making change. And so that's a very valuable thing in a profession that's changing all the time, right? And so it's a focus that is on asking questions. Questions are the cornerstone of how this change happens, because the questions are used to help the participant get really clear about what they want. What is it exactly that's a problem for them? What have they tried before? How long have they been thinking about this? What is the nature of the problem that they're trying to solve? And what have they done before? What are they really good at? What can they draw on? Who might they draw on? Cast a broader net. And then the other great thing about questions is that when you answer them and you have to commit to something, that means that things have changed. Because when you declare it, I'm going to do X by Y, there's momentum in that. It's a commitment to accountability, and it's a commitment to moving forward. So I think that in the absence of an employment relationship or articles or access to what we might have considered more organic kind of mentorship relationships, it's really hard to find an opportunity to observe a role model. It's really hard to find opportunities to get direct feedback on what you've done. And I think that this is one of the ways that coaching is unique in that it allows us to bridge that gap, because it's really about using questions to increase the capacity for critical thinking and reflective learning. So what are we hoping that our coaches are bringing? Well, in addition to your lovely selves, we hope that coaches come to each engagement with curiosity and a real willingness to engage with what the participant is experiencing right now. And that goes back to that theme that I was talking about around what is needed right now. So the beautiful thing about coaching is that it's really focused on that experience of that individual right now in their practice. I can't assume that what worked for me 20 years ago is going to be still relevant. And so I need to really bring my best self and ask really great questions, which I'm good at because I'm a lawyer and it's part of my skill set, right? So this is the thing, we get to use an existing skill set and we get to use it just in a slightly different way to raise awareness with our colleagues. So if we can let go of some of those assumptions about what the problem might be and we support a process, then what we're doing is allowing our colleagues to experience that wonderful aha, which is all the more delicious when you get there yourself. And actually, there's some brain science around that. It's not just delicious, it actually creates momentum and crystallization. I just wanted to share with you an excerpt of a letter that I recently received from another participant. What she wrote was, I first approached this program with a degree of skepticism. I had not imagined lawyers to have a lot of free time to coach others, and I didn't expect the level of experience, skill, and empathy that the coach brought to our meetings. To say that this experience exceeded my expectations is a vast understatement. The coaching affirmed that I belong, and I was provided with the foundation of skills for me to develop in order to succeed and thrive professionally. The individual then goes on to say, I have and will continue to encourage my friends and colleagues who are members of the LSO to connect to other lawyers through this program, and one day to contribute as coaches or advisors. So I think that's just a great example of that kind of learning in action. And this person now is ready to bring herself in the same way to help others in the profession. So this is how Coach Request works. It takes us about 15 business days, sometimes longer. The realities are this is a volunteer-driven program, and whether or not we have somebody depends on whether or not we have a body that matches the particular needs of the participant at the time. And we do our best to try and get those preferences in, and then we peel back the preferences to get to the core if that's what we need to do. And if we get to the point where we can't meet the need at all, then we tell them that we can't meet the need. So sometimes it takes longer, unfortunately, but every time we grow the roster a little bit more, that means that we'll be able to reduce those wait times. And just from the point of view of volunteers, and putting this into the back of your mind, sometimes volunteers, they can have a dissatisfying experience if the person that they've been matched with doesn't follow up. And so one of the things that we've introduced is an intake call to really make sure that the participants are ready for this kind of experience so that our volunteers' time is being used optimally. So that's a recent shift that we've made to keep our volunteers happy so that they're getting a really good experience. And also, frankly, to make sure the participants know what they want. Going back to advising, questions are just as relevant in advising. You know this from your experience in practice. You gather facts, you challenge assumptions, you're poking at their thinking. Maybe you provide some supports or suggestions for next steps. And so although you're drawing as an advisor on your legal experience and expertise, you're not providing legal advice. You are bringing a fresh perspective, and you are, again, trying to figure out what's needed right now for that particular person. So our advisors, as I said, have at least 5 years experience, substantive or procedural. Most of them have way more. I think that this is a really important thing to recognize, that this is a safe space. So even if you're in a firm environment where you are benefiting from some forms of mentorship or a concrete hallway, not a virtual hallway, sometimes you have a question, you're like, I really don't want to ask that question. this is a safe space to ask a silly question. And this is also a place where you can come and get a little bit of guidance so that you're not reinventing the wheel. And I think that what's important about the advisor's approach is that really what they're doing is they're modeling problem solving. And so that, in the old mentorship models, that's what was happening. When your mentor went to court and they made their submissions, you were observing, and that role modeling is the thing that was teaching you. An advisor in this kind of engagement is doing exactly that. They are modeling problem solving and therefore increasing capacity for the individual to do that for themselves the next time. As one participant put it, I met yesterday with my advisor as a result of CAN. He's a bit hyperbolic, but he was clearly excited. He says, wow, I'm sold. The advisor was excellent, and I feel about 4,000% better about my understanding of the problem, next steps, and my confidence. Great program. So we get lots of nice little notes like that, which makes my work fun, because what I know is that it matters and that it's having an impact. So this is how an advisor request works. We aim for 2 days, but the reality is with emails back and forth, it's often closer to 5 days. And what we do, which is distinct in the advisor stream, is the staff will pre-clear the name of the potential advisor with the participant. And this is just an additional measure to guard against potential conflicts. Once the match is made, by the way, Ken steps back. We're no longer involved. We create the relationship and then we monitor, we send out surveys, we're getting feedback, but we're not involved unless there's a problem. If there's a problem, people are expected to come back to us and we'll help them solve the problem or find a new match if that's what's needed. But we're not kind of ongoing involved and the information within that engagement is between those two people and is confidential. So the voice of the participants for coaching, they sound something like this. I'm transitioning my practice. I'd like to explore the benefits and challenges of a sole practice. I want help jumping from being a student to being a professional. I'm considering setting up a home office. So you can hear in those examples that this is really about practice management, and it's about kind of career development talks and enhancing where they're at. For advisors, the way the participant voice sounds is something like this. This is my first time doing and then you can fill in the blank. It's my first time doing an equalization of net family property. This is my first time doing a Henson Trust. It's my first time doing a mandamus in federal court, any of the above. Or they might be saying things like, I'm looking for strategies or suggestions for dealing with, insert the name of the party, an unrepresented litigant, difficult opposing counsel, a client that has unreasonable expectations. So that's the nature of that kind of help that they're often looking for, and these are the practice areas that are most often coming up. So because these areas are the intense areas, we're always interested in volunteers who have this background for advisors. So this is what we've been up to for the past few years, and I just wanted to back up and tell you a little bit about the 270 volunteers that we have. Actually, it's more than that, slightly higher than that, but that's the CAN roster right now. The median date of our roster is 1999, so some really good seasoned individuals that are on there. 82% of our roster come from sole or small firm environments, so we have a very robust representation of the sole practitioner and small firm practitioner on the roster. About half of our volunteers come from the GTA, and the rest are spread across the province. And I've been kind of playing with this idea that if you're with CAN, you're in good company, because CAN is really for problem-solving leaders. And so I was thinking about this, like, why did I have this impression? But when you see the applications that come in from the volunteers, there are people who are benchers, there are people who are on boards of other legal associations and organizations. We have faculty from faculties of law. We have thought influencers. We have managing partners. We have practice leads. We have articling principals. So what we have is this, again, this real lovely depth and breadth of experience on our volunteer roster. So we've had some very positive feedback. These are great outcomes for us. The median date of call for the participant is about 2016. So more on the junior side, but we do sometimes get requests from more senior practitioners. About 35% of the participants are in the GTA, and again, the balance of those participants are drawn from across the province. And one thing I just wanted to note about the number, the 84% say that they're satisfied with the engagement. One thing that has been very interesting to me is measuring the subjective impressions, assessment, on the part of the volunteers and on the part of the participants. And what we have found is that when we ask the question, do you think the engagement helped you move forward towards your goal, there is a high degree of alignment. So the volunteers are perceiving that there's value in the engagement, and the participants are also perceiving that there was value in the engagement. So when you have alignment like that on surveys, that's also a very positive thing. And again, I think it means that our volunteers are going to know that their time is impactful and valuable. So I wanted to highlight a new sort of initiative or a program that was within CAN. We have a mandate to be evolving and innovative and to respond to the needs as we identify them. And so we had an initiative brought to us from one of our CAN volunteers who said, I know that we have coaches that focus on firm management, but would it make sense for us to focus a program that might be a little bit longer and would focus specifically on leadership of smaller firms? And I said, well, that's very interesting. I think that would be a great way of reaching another market. And yeah, we already have some capacity for that. So let's explore that further. And I don't know, this might resonate from the presentation that was done earlier today by Cleo, but supporting firm managers in the small firm environments would seem to me to be very important when you think about the stats that have been highlighted through there. So this program is intended for firm leaders who are in firms that have between 2 and 20 client service professionals, and we are seeking to match them with people who have had leadership roles in firms of at least 5 years. And it will be a cohort approach, so it'll be starting in January and ending in June, and it will be 14 hours of one-on-one coaching with seasoned firm leaders. So that's our latest little adventure, and we're recruiting now for the roster and accepting applications for the participants. So I was recently having a conversation with one of our volunteers, and he was so eloquent. I wish that he was here to tell you about his experience with CAN, but he's not. So you'll have to just take my jot notes here of the conversation I had with him. And I think that we were talking about, is CAN hitting the right balance? Are we striking the right balance for volunteer needs? And so what he said was, well, what I really like about the CAN program is that it offers a way to give back to the professions in a way that's manageable and flexible and is a just right time commitment. He said, many mentorship programs require significant investments of time, but CAN allows its volunteers to have an impact without being too time intensive. So that got me to thinking a little bit about if I was going to be recruiting leaders to join a roster, what might they want to think about when they think about what kind of, what are their considerations when they're thinking about where they want to volunteer? And so one of them is time. We don't have a lot of time. What does CAN offer? These are very short, discrete, well-defined relationships. As a volunteer, we're not going to ask you to take on more than 2 advisor engagements in any given month or more than 3 coaching engagements in a year. You, of course, can ask to have fewer. You can ask to have more, and we are able to accommodate that. And I mean, on this note, I would say that anecdotally, once the connection's been made, people do go back. They've made a relationship. So we're facilitating something, we're at the front end of something, but what comes from this, it's like, water in a garden. It could be, we don't know. We don't know precisely what it is, but we know that they have made a connection and that it's been impactful. And so they can take it from there. The other thing that comes up sometimes is training. If I'm going to have to volunteer in this program, am I going to be obliged to do a whole bunch of training, and is it going to be onerous? Or versus that, I'm in a new role, I really need support, I want training. Okay, so no matter which way you fall on that, CAN has something for you. It's optional, It's highly recommended, but it's optional. And we have a flexible, self-guided online program for you to use, which is micro-learning based. None of the demonstration videos take longer than 9 minutes. And it's just in time. It's like depending on where you are at in the stage of your engagement, you have access to this. Preparation, you don't have to prepare. We're counting on you to ask great questions. This is not about you like memorizing a curriculum and playing it back. Risk, we consulted with Law Pro in the development of this program, and the documentation and the agreements qualify for their own mentorship risk management criteria. And so that would mean that the waivers and claims history surcharge would be waived in the unlikely event that there was a claim arising from a mentorship relationship. I think volunteers want to know that they have impact. I've talked about that lots. And I guess the other benefit I would just highlight is that mentoring within mentoring, coaching, and advising is an eligible activity. And so what that means is this would meet your CPD requirement. 3 hours of that does need to be professionalism, but your CAN staff team have very carefully crafted training relevant to your role that includes professionalism hours. So we are trying to make sure that this is a high-value opportunity for our volunteers as well. So as I said before, advisors, we always need them in family, real estate, estate, civil litigation. We need coaches in family, real estate, immigration, civil litigation, and estates. So please spread the word. There's a sign-up sheet out at the booth outside. If there's any way that we can assist you, assist your members, spread the word, or provide, I don't know, let's have a conversation. Let's just leave it at that. I started with a question about what's needed right now, and I've told you that I think CAN is an important part of the answer, but I think that you and your members are also an important part of the answer too, and we really need problem-solving leaders like you. So, thank you very much for your time.